Breaking tonight, right at the beginning of this show, President Trump saying Iran and Israel have agreed to a ceasefire. He says it will be phased in over 24 hours. We have yet to hear from the Iranians or the Israelis. It's overnight there. Also tonight, he is trying to make sure the price of oil does not rise dramatically following the U.S. airstrikes against Iranian nuclear facilities. President Trump will head to The Hague tomorrow for a NATO summit. Senior White House correspondent Peter Doocy is already there tonight with the latest. Good evening, Peter.
Good evening, Brett. President Trump didn't want to be out of the country for the tail end of the G7 last week because he needed to monitor the situation in Iran from the Situation Room at the White House. But with this ceasefire announcement tonight, there's expected to be enough of a break in the action that he will soon cross the Atlantic for this week's NATO summit.
He has prevented a nuclear conflict.
Today, President Trump watched Iran retaliate against a U.S. base in Qatar that he visited just last month.
Al Udeid Air Base, sometimes referred to as the Deed.
Qatar has continued to act as the middleman during back-channel talks between the U.S. and Iran. And today, the president said, "I'd like to thank the highly respected Emir of Qatar for all that he has done in seeking peace for the region." But the president is still concerned about oil prices and roughly 20% of the world's oil and natural gas shipments getting stuck if Iran closes the Strait of Hormuz.
Even the threat is increasing the price of oil.
The Iranian people need it in order to survive for their own economic benefits or not thereof.
Iran, they need the revenue from oil. China wants their oil, they get it at a deep discount.
Ahead of President Trump's visit to the NATO summit tomorrow, one country is already saying they won't be spending more on defense: Spain.
We are normalizing the fact that certain powers are bombing each other, that their leaders exchange nuclear threats, and that the civilian population is the one suffering all of these consequences.
So far, 22 of 32 NATO member states pay 2% of their GDP, as expected, but the president plans to pressure them to start spending 5%.
The president has been adamant, and our NATO allies, to their credit, heeded the president's strong call in his first term, and we expect them to do it this time around as well.
And we just reported about President Trump saying thanks to the Emir of Qatar for their efforts to bring peace to the Middle East. We now have a source familiar telling us that Qatar was passing messages from U.S. diplomats to Iranian diplomats in the lead up to today's attack on Al Udeid Air Base. As for here in the Netherlands, leaders this week want a strong NATO because it is a big deterrent against Russian aggression. But all this action in Iran may suck up more of the oxygen than they were planning on because these leaders of countries with strong militaries want to know what is going to happen next, especially because the way that NATO works, if one member gets attacked, they are all responsible for helping with the defense. Brett?
Article 5, Peter Doocy at The Hague. Peter, thanks.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Ingram Angle. I'm Laura Ingram, my angle in moments. But first, tonight, we begin with major breaking news. It's a development that few thought was possible even a few days ago. But with President Trump in charge, we've seen time and time again, the so-called experts are proven wrong. President Trump says Israel and Iran have agreed to a full ceasefire, taking effect in just a few hours. In a Truth Social post in the last hour, the president wrote, "Congratulations to everyone. There will be a complete and total ceasefire in approximately 6 hours from now, when Israel and Iran would have wound down and completed their in-progress final missions for 12 hours, at which point the war will be considered ended." On that assumption that everything works out as it should, which it will, I would like to congratulate both countries, Israel and Iran, on having the stamina, courage, and intelligence to end what should be called the 12-day war. This is a war that could have gone on for years and destroyed the entire Middle East, but it didn't and never will. Here with me now is Brett Baer, chief political anchor and special report anchor, executive editor there as well. Brett, you were on the air. We were all watching with Vice President Vance when Trump's Truth Social post landed. So that was in and of itself kind of hilarious. But do we have details about how this all came together in the last hour?
Well, Laura, good evening. It really was something. Let me just give you the behind the scenes. Trey Yingst was in the middle of wrapping up his report from Tel Aviv, and the producer got in my ear saying, Trump Truth Social coming in the email right now. And I looked down, the vice president's right here on set with me. And as I look down to read it, his staff comes in with an iPhone so he can read the Truth Social as it's coming in. And Trey Yingst wraps up his live report. I thank him. I introduce the vice president and obviously start with what we just heard and saw. And he said he had heard about it, talked about it, hadn't seen the final version, and that's what he was reacting to. Since then, we've learned that Qatar was the intermediary and that Iran officials are now saying they did, in fact, authorize Qatar to negotiate on their behalf, at least according to Reuters and other wire services, and that the Israelis are going to agree to this in a 6-hour time frame. Now, what happens between now and the 6 hours? I expect a lot of kinetic action inside Iran from the Israelis, but that's what it looks like. And then the details that the president laid out about how it follows over the next 24, 48 hours, we don't know what that picture looks like or whether it leads to negotiations.
Well, what was stunning is that just in the last several hours, the supreme leader put out a statement saying, we will not submit. We will never submit. So something was changing in that interim time period, and I guess he was made an offer he couldn't refuse.
Maybe so. We don't know. The supreme leader is supposed to be holed up in a bunker. That the going thing in Iran, we're told, is that everyone doesn't know where he is except the Israelis and the U.S. And they have said that they could take him out at any time. I don't know what has transpired that changed the Iranians' bold action, other than to read the tea leaves here. They gave a pre-warning about the missile strike on Qatar and Al Udeid Air Base, saying this is going to happen, get your people out of there. And then the air defenses took down those missiles, including one from Qatar. And, you know, I think that the president's very weak response post and let's get to peace started phone calls between all of the parties, according to the vice president. And in between the time he left the White House and the time he arrived on this set, something had transpired to get that Truth Social post.
And the president even thanked Iran for the heads up, as you noted with Vance, which it all seemed like it was missile theater at some point. They gave them a chance to save face, shoot up a couple of, you know, what looked like Roman candles. I mean, they were missiles,
yeah.
But and no damage was done, as far as we understand, on the ground. So you wonder why they even went through that exercise. But nevertheless, the president didn't choose to humiliate Iran in this moment, which I think that's classic Trump. He wants to give people a way out.
He did say, let's get to peace, let's get to the table. He called it very weak and thanked them for the heads up. But, you know, it follows a pattern. In 2020, the Iranians did the same thing. They fired on a U.S. military base in Iraq, but they also gave a heads up ahead of time. That was after the Soleimani assassination, the takedown of the main military commander for Iran by the U.S., and so it follows a pattern. We'll see if this also follows a ceasefire, because, as you know, the Israelis feel like they have a lot of superiority in the skies and they can take out targets at will. And they're on the cusp of making a big change to their existential threat. So it may be tough for them to agree to it, but I think the president is pushing.
And, Brett, although people don't want to be political in this moment, politics always enters the equation. We had an enormous amount of kind of nastiness across the political aisle over the last few days regarding the president's decision. So some Democrats were more, tepid about it, but others were basically very, very negative on what the president was doing. How do you see this moment playing out politically?
I mean, John Fetterman was the only Democrat I saw very vocal in his support of the action. Others were either tepid or saying it was unconstitutional and he had to come to Congress first. I think a lot of those Democrats, if you look back at President Obama's actions in Lebanon, in Syria, they were not anywhere near as vocal about the congressional authorization issue back then. Politically, I think it plays pretty well. He's kept his party largely together. There are some vocal voices, as you know, Marjorie Taylor Greene and others, Tom Massey, but fairly small in number and in voice. And I think it really depends how this ceasefire works out and what comes next.
Brett, thank you very much. That was an unbelievable interview. Energy Secretary Chris Wright. Mr. Secretary, big news tonight before we booked you to come on the show about this ceasefire deal that's going to take effect, the ceasefire, in just a few hours from now. Your thoughts about this day, especially as it related to the oil shipments through the Gulf, through the Strait of Hormuz, and Iran's threats. You heard the Admiral's comments, but Americans were very concerned.
Yeah, look, Donald Trump is just simply a transformative president. A little over a week ago, major hostilities break out in the Middle East. And as the Admiral just talked about, this is the lifeblood of global oil flows. Big flows for natural gas as well. Everyone's predicting for sure over $100 oil is just around the corner. Then we have strong leadership from our president, precision strikes over the weekend to take out Iran's key nuclear facilities. Everyone thinks that's another $20 on the price of oil. And here we are Monday evening, and oil dropped below $70 a barrel. And more importantly for American consumers, wholesale gasoline was down over 10 cents today and diesel down 15%. That is the collective benefits of President Trump's energy dominance agenda and his strong, clear, peace through strength leadership style. It's just transforming the Middle East.
Now, Mr. Secretary, for those of us who were young politicos back in the 80s, and I happen to work for President Reagan, this is a Reagan-esque move on the part of President Trump. I mean, the America First agenda at play. There were a lot of people on the right who were very concerned, and I had my concerns. I don't like any military involvement if we can avoid it, but he made a decision that there was no good reason to avoid this military engagement, that it was critical for America first.
I love the Reagan-esque comparison. Ronald Reagan just looked at the Soviet Union completely differently than all the leaders before him. He saw the black and white. He saw the good and evil. And the only way you win is by being clear and strong and bold. And he did just that. Donald Trump got elected to do the same thing with American energy policy and with American foreign policy. Iran has been a mess. They've been the cause of all the trouble and instability for 46 years now in this entire region of the world. He didn't follow the old playbook, the Biden playbook of appeasement, ask them nicely to do less bad behavior, don't enforce the sanctions and give Iran a bunch of money. That didn't work. President Trump came in with a very different approach. And we're still in the midst of this, but just dramatically different results in the Middle East and for American energy buyers.
Now, Mr. Secretary, we're just getting new details in about the ceasefire. Reuters is reporting that President Trump brokered the agreement with a phone call with Netanyahu this afternoon, and that Vance, Rubio, and Envoy Witkoff held direct and indirect talks over the last few days with the Iranians. Again, to your point, he just decided to abandon this idea that you don't treat Iran like they're real people there. And he's like, they are people. They want a better life. Someone there wants a better life for these people. I'm going to try to play to that while I play America's strength on the world stage. But the old guard, they didn't go the Trump way, and they talked him down for years and years, and no one else could have pulled this off. And again, assuming this all holds.
I agree, Laura. Just a totally transformative style. You know, President Trump's one constituency is the American people. And when he does foreign policy, who's his constituency in Iran? 90 million Iranians. That was, this is an educated, technically successful, pretty doing well society not long ago, and it's gone backwards for 46 years. Those Iranians, they want peace and trade and prosperity just like we want in the United States, just like the rest of the Middle East does. Maybe they're going to get a taste of it.
Well, they're going to have to step up and find their new leader. Mr. Secretary, the president said drill, baby, drill today or yesterday when he was concerned about the price, perhaps, of oil going up. But this seems like great news so far. Thank you very much for joining us. Explain, Jonathan Turley, George Washington University law prof and Fox News contributor. I mean, that was a tough moment for old AOC there. The ceasefire. So we got to impeach Trump. Yeah. Jonathan, let's go to the substance of this. The substance of this, because I know you have some history about ceasefire negotiations and a president involved and these kinds of things. But tell us what we should know.
Well, you have to feel for AOC. You're all dressed up for an impeachment and peace breaks out. It's sort of a Marissa Tomei moment from My Cousin Vinny. What a nightmare. And the problem is that it doesn't make for a very good impeachment, and that's why she was struggling. The other problem is that if this is impeachable, you could impeach a good number of presidents going back to Thomas Jefferson, who moved against the Barbary pirates. You would also include Bill Clinton and Barack Obama. I mean, Obama in 2016 alone dropped over 26,000 bombs on countries ranging from Somalia to Syria to Afghanistan to Iraq. There was no suggestion by Democrats that they had to immediately impeach Barack Obama. The fact is that presidents have always claimed this authority to be able to commit troops and take military action. And yes, in my view, this is an act of war, but the way that courts and Congress have interpreted it is it is not something that requires a declaration. And keep in mind, we've only declared 11 wars in our history. We've had over 125 military operations, some going on for years, without such a declaration, including Vietnam and Korea.
Yeah, I think it's probably a good idea for Congress to have to weigh in on war, especially protracted conflicts and boots on the ground. Right. But this obviously was, her point was ridiculous from the beginning. Now, we had another big win for President Trump today. I mean, he has lots of wins to talk about today. But this was the Supreme Court, at least temporarily, clearing the way for the White House to speed up these deportations and send illegals to countries where they have no previous ties. How important is this, Jonathan, tonight?
This is enormously important. It gives a great number of options now to the Trump administration. It should have the effect of speeding up deportations. This Boston judge actually said that he believed the Supreme Court and Congress were on his side. Well, obviously he was wrong about one of those by 6-3, because that's the result today. And the court said you can send people to a country other than their home country. That is a major stumbling block for the administration. They have a lot of people to deport, but they also don't have cooperative countries often on the other side. This gives them options, and you can bet they're going to use it.
Yeah, and I think the Trump administration does not have the time to give the process that the left thinks every illegal alien is due. Most of them have already been given their own due process. But, Jonathan, this is fascinating. Incredible day of news. Thank you very much.
What happened with Iran in the Middle East, and some breaking news coming just now. Joining us this evening, Vice President J.D. Vance. Mr. Vice President, thanks for coming.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Just seconds ago, the president went to Truth Social and typed this. It has been fully agreed by and between Israel and Iran that there will be a complete and total ceasefire. Complete and total ceasefire is what he typed.
Yep.
What does that mean? How did it come about? What's the development here?
Well, we were actually working on that just as I left the White House to come over here. So that's good news that the president was able to get that across the finish line. I think what it means, Brett, is quite simple. First of all, the president, without, knock on wood, having a single American casualty, obliterated the Iranian nuclear program. We are now in a place where we weren't a week ago. A week ago, Iran was very close to having a nuclear weapon. Now, Iran is incapable of building a nuclear weapon with the equipment they have because we destroyed it. So that's a very, very big thing. Now, what that means, I think, is we have to talk to Iran and, of course, to Israel about what the future holds. Because while we have obliterated the Iranian nuclear program, our hope and our expectation is that they're not going to try to rebuild that program. And I think that's what the president is really trying to figure out here, is to build a long-term settlement here to where we can have peace in the region. region where our regional allies and, of course, the American people, most importantly, can be secured, but where we can ensure that the destruction of the Iranian nuclear program that has already happened is not something they try to rebuild.
I want to get to the obliterated part in just a minute, but I just want to read this fully so I get the context here. Congratulations to everyone. It has been fully agreed by and between Israel and Iran that there will be a complete and total ceasefire in approximately 6 hours from now, when Israel and Iran have wound down and completed their in-progress final missions for 12 hours, at which point, the ceasefire for 12 hours, at which point the war will be considered ended. Officially, Iran will start the ceasefire, and upon the 12th hour, Israel will start the ceasefire, and upon the 24th hour, an official end to the 12-day war will be saluted by the world. During each ceasefire, the other side will remain peaceful and respectful on the assumption that everything works as it should, which it will. I would like to congratulate both countries, Israel and Iran, on having the stamina, courage, and intelligence to end what should be called the 12-day war. This is a war that could have gone on for years and destroyed the entire Middle East, but it didn't and never will. God bless Israel. God bless Iran. God bless Iran. God bless the Middle East. God bless the United States of America. And God bless the world. He seems confident that this is all coming together.
That's right.
And when you left the White House, were you thinking this was all gelling here?
When I left the White House, I thought that we might be able to get it across the finish line before this broadcast, and it looks like the president has been able to do that. I mean, look, he's been working the phones constantly. Frankly, before the 12-day war started, but certainly over the past 12 days, the president's been extremely clear about America's national objective here. It is to create a world where Iran cannot build a nuclear weapon. We, of course, destroyed the nuclear program that they had, and the president told the entire team, we're going to work to make sure that they don't try to rebuild that nuclear capability in the future. And it's, look, this is a great thing. For Israel, think about this. They've accomplished an important military objective. They've helped us destroy the Iranian nuclear program. They've also destroyed the conventional missile capability of Iran that threatened the country of Israel. For the Iranians, I think this is a new opportunity to actually pursue the path of peace. As I said yesterday, what the Iranians have showed through their support of terror networks, through their now failed effort to build a nuclear weapon, is that they're just not very good at war. And I think the president really hit the reset button and said, look, let's actually produce long-term peace for the region. That's always been his goal. I actually think when we look back, we will say the 12-day war was an important reset moment for the entire region.
Would you be surprised if Iran is sending out signals that it doesn't have a specific ceasefire plan? How would the communication have been with the Iranians to get this level of confidence to put out that detailed statement?
Well, one of the things I've learned, Brett, about the Iranians in the past, 4 or 5 months that I've been in this job is what they say publicly and privately can sometimes be very different. I think what the Iranians have shown very clearly is they don't want this war to go on for much longer. Their air defenses have been totally destroyed. Their conventional missile program has been largely destroyed. And, of course, their nuclear program has been obliterated, as I said before. So I think the Iranians are at a place where they don't want to keep on fighting. You saw the president, and I don't have the truth in front of me, but he talked about the next 6 hours finalizing the attacks. I mean, I think what he's talking about is right now, for the American people watching, it's dark over there. That's typically when the Israelis and the Iranians have been shooting at each other. I think there's some recognition that that might continue for another few hours, and tomorrow really is a new day. The end of the 12-day war, the end of the Iranian nuclear program, and I really do believe the beginning of something very big for peace in the Middle East.
So you said totally obliterated. The president has said totally obliterated the Iran nuclear program.
Yeah.
Do you know for sure where all the highly enriched uranium is?
Well, Brett, I think that's actually not the question before us. The question before us is, can Iran enrich the uranium to a weapons-grade level, and can they convert that fuel to a nuclear weapon? And we know, based on the success of our mission, of course, the leadership of the president, but the incredible skill of our military, that the two mission objectives are completely successful. We know that they cannot build a nuclear weapon. Now, you asked about the highly enriched uranium.
Yeah, like 900 pounds of it.
But what we know, Brett, is that uranium is something that exists in very large supply. Our goal was to bury the uranium, and I do think the uranium is buried, but our goal was to eliminate the enrichment and eliminate their ability to convert that enriched fuel into a nuclear weapon. I think this is an important point, Brett, because so many of the folks who have focused on the highly enriched uranium,
60%.
The main focus, Brett, has been to destroy their enrichment capacity, because we don't want that 60% uranium to become 90% uranium. That's the real concern, and that's what was so successful about our mission.
So after all this, if the Iranian government survives as is, what's to stop it from rebuilding over time if they, in fact, moved the 60% highly enriched uranium? You know, that's the concern.
No, the big concern, Brett, and this is again what we destroyed, is their ability to enrich uranium. If they have 60% enriched uranium, but they don't have the ability to enrich it to 90%, and further, they don't have the ability to convert that to a nuclear weapon, that is mission success. That is the obliteration of their nuclear program, which is why the president, I think, rightly is using that term. But here's the question. If Iran is desperate to build a nuclear weapon in the future, then they're going to have to deal with a very, very powerful American military again. Our hope is that the lesson that the Iranians have learned here is, look, we can fly a bunker buster bomb from Missouri to Iran completely undetected without landing once on the ground, and we can destroy whatever nuclear capacity you build up. I think that lesson is what's going to teach them not to rebuild their nuclear capacity.
Yesterday, were you speaking on the president's behalf when you said he was not interested in regime change?
Well, Brett, what I've said is the American military, that is not our mission as regime change. Our mission was to destroy the nuclear facilities and the nuclear program of Iran, which we, of course, did. I think what the president's also said is that the Iranian people want to make a decision about regime change. That's between the Iranian people and the regime. Of course, we support freedom fighters all around the world, but our mission was to destroy the nuclear facilities, and that's what we did.
So you don't think there's any mixed message when he goes to Truth Social and says it's not politically correct to use the term regime change, but if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, why wouldn't there be a regime change? MIGA.
Well, I think what the president is saying very clearly, Brett, is if the Iranian people want to do something about their own leadership, that's up to the Iranian people. What the American national security interest here is very simple. It's to destroy the nuclear program. That's what we've done. And now that the 12-day war appears to be effectively over, we have an opportunity, I think, to restart a real peace process. And Brett, this is not just about two countries, Iran and Israel. All of these Gulf Arab states, they want peace. They want to invest. They want to build artificial intelligence hardware. They want to sort of come into the new economy. And that was impossible when you had Iran that was, as the president said, acting like a bully across the Middle East. We really think that if the Iranians are smart about the path forward, this could be a new dawn of an economic age of prosperity, of course, for our Gulf Arab allies, for us, for the Israelis, for everybody. But it's going to require the Iranians play it smart from here.
The president called it very weak, the Iran missile firing on the U.S. base in Qatar, Al Udeid. Was it a face-saving move? How do you get from that, firing missiles at a U.S. base, to a ceasefire, as he details in this Truth Social?
Well, as the president said, they actually gave us some warning here. And we think they gave us some warning because they didn't want to kill Americans and they didn't want to escalate. There's definitely some symbolism to this, Brett. If you look at the Iranian attack, it was 14 missiles that they telegraphed ahead of time. We dropped 14 bunker buster bombs. As the president told me earlier, our missiles, our bombs were a little bit bigger than their bombs. Our bombs actually accomplished the goal of eliminating their nuclear program. But look, we're happy, again, to restart the peace process as the president just did today.
Was the message delivered directly to the U.S. or through an emissary?
The message is always delivered through some sort of intermediary. That's been consistently true of the Iranians. Of course, we'd love to talk to them. The president's been clear about this. We'd love to have a direct conversation about how we move this thing forward because, again, we got to step back here. Why did the president do what he did over the past week? It's so that we could destroy their nuclear program. If they try to rebuild it, they're going to be on the wrong end of American power once again. We don't want that. I think they don't want that, but the ball's in their hands.
You've been reluctant or at least cautious about getting engaged previously, and that has been public. What made you sign on to this action this time?
Well, I think the president has been very clear, and I've always agreed with the president that Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. And you try to run the diplomatic process as much as you possibly can. When the president decided that wasn't going to work, he took the action that he had to take. Now we're in a new phase. That action was successful. We had a wildly successful military operation to take out their nuclear program. Now let's go on to the next phase. And I think the president, look, sometimes he's willing to use peace. Sometimes he's willing to use the military. I think it really depends on what the Iranians do from here.
And what do you think they do from here?
Well, it's an open question, Brett. I don't want to predict what the other side will do, but I think that I know what we'll do if they continue to pursue a nuclear weapon. And I hope they don't choose that path, because I know the president wants to see the Middle East become peaceful and prosperous in the future. That's not going to happen if Iran pursues a nuclear weapon again.
And for the people, so we talked about the people who believe that this is going towards World War III, especially in your own party. There's a section that's very vocal. There's another section that says you should take out this regime because it's evil and horrible and has done horrible things for decades. How do you square those two sides? And can this regime stay in place and still have a peaceful, reaction relationship with the U.S.?
Well, I think the president has squared those two sides quite well. One, because he's the leader of the movement, and a lot of people trust the president, as they should. They recognize they're not seeing the same intelligence. They're not seeing the same classified documents. They trust the president to do a good job. But importantly, Brett, I think he's threaded the needle quite well here. We had a very particular objective. It was profound and difficult to accomplish.
Do you think
the elimination of the Iranian nuclear program.
Do you think they were close?
And I think the president successfully did that. You're asking, were the Iranians close to a nuclear weapon? Brett, they were very close to a nuclear weapon. And what I encourage my fellow Americans to think about here is that a week ago, the Iranians were quite close to achieving a nuclear weapon. Now they cannot build a nuclear weapon. That is the biggest testament to the president's leadership and to the success of our mission. In 1 week, without, thank God so far, not losing a single American casualty, we have taken what was a threatening nuclear program that could have destabilized the entire world. Now that program is gone. We did it through effective presidential leadership and also some very, very competent work from our troops.
How often does it happen where you're going to do an interview and you get a Truth Social seconds before? You have some sense of it, but it's pretty detailed, where you are being asked about something the president has just put out.
In this administration, Brett, it happens quite a bit, actually, but we knew this was coming. The draft, it was interesting. I just read the draft about 2 minutes before we went on the air. It was a little bit different from what the president had showed me a couple of hours ago. But again, I knew that he was working the phones as I was on the way over here. So I knew exactly what we were going to do. And look, I love that about this presidency and this administration, is he's always working. He doesn't say, the vice president's going to do an interview, so I'm going to stop doing anything. He says, we're going to do the American people's business. The vice president knows what I'm trying to accomplish. And if I get it done, great, because we're going to talk about it and celebrate it, because it is a thing to celebrate. I can't emphasize this enough, Brett. We have destroyed the Iranian nuclear program. 0 Americans have died. That's an amazing, amazing thing. Americans, whether Democrats or Republicans, we should be celebrating that.
Mr. Vice President, we appreciate you coming and rolling with the punches as well.
Of course.
Thank you for the time.
Thanks, Brett. Good to see you.
Nationally syndicated radio host Dana Lash is here. All right, so how are the Democrats handling these strikes and this quick ceasefire?
Jesse, it's pretty unbelievable because they're all over the map on this. I mean, I remember going all the way back to the Green Revolution and going back to Egypt and Libya. Democrats loved unilateral action. They loved unilateral action in Libya, going after Gaddafi and trying to reinstitute a bunch of Clinton stooges in order to nation build. They loved getting involved in Egyptian elections and backing the Muslim Brotherhood, as Hillary Clinton did, a banned entity in Egypt before then. They loved getting involved in Honduran elections and trying to back different leaders in Honduras. I mean, we could go on and on. I don't know if there's ever been a moment in my life where Democrats haven't loved unilateral action and nation building. And to just the cherry on top of all of this, everybody remembers the entire reason we are in this position in the first place is because of Jimmy Carter and Democrats back in the 70s when they decided to get rid of the Shah and they installed the Mullah regime. That's exactly why we're in this position. Democrats own it, so you would think that they would be celebrating that their legacy has come full circle, but they haven't yet. And as far as the argument on whether or not the office of the executive has unilateral action, I've made my position very clear on my radio program, Jesse. I think war is a last resort. I'm not an interventionist, but I'm not a neocon. However, I would like to direct people to reread, if they haven't, or read James Madison and the Federalist Papers, because it's all brilliantly lined out. And it's in these things, Jesse, for progressives to read, called books.
You can have a noble objection to these strikes. Sure. There was people on the right who had it. There's people on the left that have it. And that's fine. And that's good. I mean, not everyone's going to agree on everything. But to say that, that Trump should have asked your permission if you're Jasmine Crockett, I mean, what? I mean, I thought this was a secret aerial campaign. He's just supposed to announce to the world, Jasmine, can I please have your permission to do this? And that doesn't make any sense.
I get the objections from some of those coming on the right, because they're genuine objections that come from a place of genuine concern. Just to remind everybody, we've grown up. I mean, Jesse, you and I have grown up our entire lives with military campaigns that had mission creep. You know, the objectives were changing. It turned into these long, protracted conflicts, and then, you know, multiple generations that were involved in it. I had multiple generations in my family that were in Iraq and Afghanistan. I mean, that's like wild that would even be considered commonplace in our culture. But we kind of got off base in terms of how we prosecute conflict. So to see a one and done, or to see a politician, an elected official say, we're going to get in, we're going to do this, and we're going to get out, we're not used to that yet. So I give a lot of grace to a lot of my friends on the right who aren't all on the same page with this. That being said, I think you could look back at POTUS's first term and see that everything that he engaged in militarily, we didn't get involved in any kind of long-term committed conflict. It wasn't mission creep. What he said, we went in and we did, and then we came back out with like the most limited loss of resource and even loss of human life. And that's how it should be. So I think we're still on the right kind of acclimating to this. However, I will add, on the left, there has never been any consistency. There has never been any proper follow through. There's never been any clear communication with the American people about any of their objectives, which again is why we're in this position in the first place. So I think it's good to have a healthy dose of caution. And I like what Congressman Thomas Massie, who I know, I think, you know, he's genuinely a kind-hearted person who comes at it from a very strictly constitutionalist angle. And thank God we have people like that holding down that spectrum in Congress. I think that we can all agree that it's better to have some of those folks in Congress than not. But to see where this goes, we have to make sure that, you know, the intelligence is accurate. That's all we've been acting on. I think that the president has demonstrated in previous military conflicts and engagements that he deserves the grace and the benefit of the doubt on this. I haven't always agreed with him on everything, but I'm willing to do that with this.
Yeah, he's earned the trust of the American people, especially what he's gone through during the last term, and especially that last campaign where he almost died. Dana Lash, great to see you.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.